Thanks for joining us today on CBN. We're going to talk about the election results. Let's talk about statewide races first with our guests from Veridus, one of the state's top public affairs firms. Representing the left side of the spectrum, Jason Barraza. On the right, Matt Benson. And on my right, she's always camera ready, Lorna Romero. She runs this operation. All right, because it's Arizona, we have no idea who our next U.S. senator is going to be. Apparently every state in the country can tally its votes, but we can't. So let's assume that Kyrsten Sinema wins. Has she set the model for how a statewide Democrat needs to run in Arizona? Let's start with you, Jason.
Well, I certainly think that she is demonstrating that this is the way to do it. I think that we saw in this election a couple of different models that a Democrat could follow, and I think that Kyrsten correctly looked at where Arizona voters were and crafted her campaign around that. Rather than trying to bring them to the campaign, she went to where they were.
Matt, she's probably the most disciplined candidate on the trail this year, wouldn't you say?
Disciplined, you might say robotic, but certainly on message. And look, in terms of the model, it's not a new model. She didn't create this. This is the Janet Napolitano model. She followed it to a T, and I think that she ran probably as strong a race as a Democrat could statewide in Arizona. I mean, look at the difference between her and David Garcia. You know, Garcia getting beat by 17 to 20 points, and Sinema still within a whiskers distance of winning that race for Senate.
Is this how Democrats need to run in Arizona?
No, and I agree with Matt that this isn't necessarily a new model. I mean, we've had statewide Democrats before in the past. In recent memory, there have been a few of them because I think they've probably gone more into the David Garcia direction. I mean, Kyrsten Sinema, she's run a strong campaign. And so those folks who are looking at 2020, they need to be looking at what she's been doing to try to figure out how they can replicate that to have a successful campaign in the 2020 cycle.
All right, but let's level set this. As we tape this today, McSally's ahead, and some people say, well, with the remaining ballots, you're just confirming the results. You're not going to upend them. So let's say McSally wins. What is a statewide Democrat to do? You can't run left. You can't run center. How do you win? Jason, what do you do if you're a statewide Democrat?
I think you have to look at what policies you're putting out there, how you're drawing voters to you, what you're talking about, and what issues are going to be the topic of that campaign cycle. Those are all going to play into successful Democratic candidates in Arizona.
So Matt, McSally's ahead. If you want to run for office as a Democrat statewide, what are you supposed to do?
No, I think what you're supposed to do is exactly what Kyrsten Sinema did. And look, I'll give another model. Okay, if I'm David Garcia and I'm having a lot of second thoughts about the campaign I just ran, I'd think, gosh, I wish I could go back to David Garcia from 4 years earlier, because the campaign that he ran in 2014 was, again, more the model, right? Where he was able to reach into the middle, get support from mainstream business organizations and others, and make that a heck of a close race, which he came up just short. But again, I mean, Arizona's tough sledding for a Democrat. I mean, there's no doubt. Now, you've seen in some individual districts that they've had a lot of success legislatively, congressional-wise, but at a statewide level, it's tough sledding. And really, I mean, that is less about the races that these Democrats are running currently. It's more about how much ground Democrats lost since Janet Napolitano left office, because they lost so much ground in terms of voter registration during that period of years.
So McSally could lose Maricopa County. She's going to lose Pima County, and yet she could still win a U.S. Senate seat. That's nuts if you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's not typically the norm in Arizona, but I mean, I think that this is the situation we're in now. There's no longer a norm. I mean, we can talk about certain models that have worked in the past for Democrats and Republicans, but I think since the 2016 presidential cycle, things are up in the air. And I think everyone's just trying to figure out, if I want to be a successful statewide Republican or Democrat, where are my pockets of support in the state, and how do I get to that successful number in order to be able to win? I do think, people can talk about the 2018 midterm and what this means for 2020, but you're going to have President Trump on the ballot in 2020, so that's going to throw a whole other wrench in the situation. So you can talk about how successful Sinema has been this cycle, whether she wins or if McSally pulls it off, but it's going to be a completely different dynamic in 2 years, because it's going to bring out a different pool of voters. And so it's a question of, if you want to be a successful Democrat, how do you appeal to those Republican voters that are going to come out, independents, or moderate Republicans that maybe didn't get involved in this cycle.
Well, and one more quick thought.
Yeah.
Because if McSally holds on, this is likely to be the second cycle where a statewide candidate, a Republican, lost Pima, lost Maricopa, and still won statewide, because Diane Douglas did it 4 years ago. Yeah. And so what that tells me is Democrats need to do better in the rural counties. They may not win those rural counties, but they cannot afford to lose them by such massive numbers that a Democrat can win Pima and win Maricopa of all places and still lose.
Well, they need to start looking at what issues matter to those rural voters. They need to understand where Arizona voters are, and I think that many of our candidates haven't really looked at that. They want to take models that have worked in other places. They want to take models that have worked in California and New York, and adopt policies that have worked for Democrats there. Arizona Democrats are very different than Democrats in other parts of the country.
Look, a lot of this is speculation because we don't know who's going to win this thing. So there's a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda. But Angela Green, Green Party candidate, is getting nearly 40,000 votes. I'm making an assumption that if she's not on the ballot, those votes go to Sinema. Maybe that's an unfair assumption, but is Angela Green the MVP of the McSally campaign? I don't know.
I don't know. It's always difficult when you have a third-party candidate on the ballot. I mean, we've seen this play out in many different scenarios, even in legislative districts, where that's the kind of the deciding factor of someone winning or losing. But I mean, you can't make the assumption that all of those votes would have gone to Sinema. Maybe people would have just abstained for the race if they didn't support either candidate. But yeah, when you're looking at the close margin that it is right now, and you look at how many votes she's gotten, it's a fair assumption for people to say a good chunk of those maybe would have gone to Kirsten.
Jason, we've been having this conversation. She's not on the ballot.
Oh, she's not on the ballot. I think that we're not even having this conversation. I think a majority of those votes, I think it's safe to assume, are going to go to Kirsten. But that's the way the world is. Sometimes you have a third-party candidate, and we see it time and time again, and you have to deal with that when it pops up.
All right, let's talk another statewide race, the governor's race. Is Doug Ducey the 800-pound gorilla of Arizona politics? It wasn't even close, Matt.
No, I don't think there's any question. I mean, look, you're going to have new leadership in both the House and Senate. Likely 2 U.S. senators who are new, assuming Senator Kyle doesn't continue long into 2019. So who but Governor Ducey, the guy who just won by re-election by almost 20 points, doesn't have another re-election on the horizon anywhere, can really kind of go forth and really do what he wants to do. Nobody approaches him in Arizona, and frankly, you have to go back a long ways to find a political figure with the kind of capital that he has right now to spend over the next 4 years.
Jason, that was an impressive campaign that he put on.
It was a great campaign. You got to give him a lot of credit because at every barrier that I think that the Democrats tried to put forward, he was able to break through it or maneuver around it. And it was a fantastic campaign, and I completely agree. I think that his capital and the amount that he can wield right now in Arizona politics, he can really craft the Arizona that he wants to see.
So, Lorna, let's throw this next question to you. We talked about how Democrats ought to run. Kirsten Sinema is either going to win or lose by just a little bit. What happened to the David Garcia 4 years ago, who, as you pointed out, won Maricopa County? Why the hard turn to the left? I don't know if any of us know the answer.
I mean, I wish I could answer that question, and I think a lot of people do too, because I think he would have been a little bit more successful. Everyone looks at what their path to success may be. Kirsten chose hers. David Garcia chose his, and it didn't work out for him. And maybe he didn't think that Governor Ducey was going to turn up the volume like he did with his campaign, because it's the second that Ducey re-announced his campaign early this year, it was nonstop.
Right.
I mean, that was an impressive operation. It was textbook. They were everywhere, and the governor had a strong message to the people of Arizona. And David Garcia just showed how weak of a candidate he was by clinging on to more progressive national figures that don't resonate in the state. So that was a poor, political calculus on his part, and the governor recognized it and capitalized on it. And it was, he ran a fantastic campaign, and like you said, he is now going to be able to set the tone for his second term, kind of unquestioned by other leaders in the state.
Jason, he almost won. Garcia did 4 years ago. 4 years later, he's running for governor on free college, Medicare for all, and doubling the income tax on small business. Not a winning formula. Why do you think he made this change?
Don't forget abolish ICE.
Abolish ICE. Sorry about that.
That was a big one.
Forgot that. Yeah.
No, I don't know why he made that change. I think that there was 2 kind of missteps. One, I think that we're calling him, superintendent-elect had he stayed in that race again this year. And I think that would have been an easy path for him to follow. And I think the real David Garcia is the David Garcia we saw 4 years ago. I think he first mistake try to make himself into something he wasn't. And I think that is rooted in this idea that you go forward, you set your flag, and you hope that the voters come to you. And I think that's a wrong idea to have, but I think that that's what he was told was going to help him win this election. You need to be strong in your convictions and come forward with this strong Democratic ideology, and that's just not working in Arizona.
All right, Matt, final thoughts on the governor's race?
I think David Garcia has been watching too much MSNBC. He should probably tune back to no more than 4 or 5 hours a day, hopefully. Because I think, in all seriousness, I think he did get caught up in the idea of a blue wave and tacking as far left as possible was going to drive out all of these millennials and Latinos and other voters on the left, and it just didn't materialize in the way that he thought. So I think that was just a strategic error that really sunk his campaign early on.
All right, Lorna, Romero, Matt Benson, Jason Barraza, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.